The raging conflict in Ukraine has unleashed a major humanitarian crisis in the region. Over 1.7 million people have already fled the country in a span of just a couple of weeks, or rather days, which according to United Nations Refugee Agency is the fastest growing refugee crisis in Europe since World War II. United Nations Security Council meanwhile held an emergency meeting on Monday to address the growing crisis that unfolded soon after the conflict began. Top UN officials briefed the Security Council on the efforts of the organization is doing to assist people inside the country and everyone fleeing from the conflict. During the meeting, United Nations Relief Chief Martin Griffiths said that places like Mariupol, Kharkiv, Metropole are in desperate need of aid and assistance.
We need safe passage for humanitarian supplies into areas of active hostilities. Civilians in places like Mariupol, Kharkiv, Melitopol and elsewhere desperately need aid, especially life-saving medical supplies, the kind that have been brought in these past days by WHO.
The UNSC meeting came as Russia announced another round of ceasefire to help evacuate citizens from the war zone. Russian envoy to the United Nations said that Kremlin is now prioritizing to provide a safe passage to the civilians. Ukrainian ambassador to the UN, Sergei Klitslita, meanwhile accused Moscow of shelling humanitarian corridors, making it impossible for civilians to flee.
Russia continues to cynically disregard the norms of international humanitarian law during hostilities. Russian troops block numerous attempts of the Ukrainian authorities to evacuate civilians through humanitarian corridors. They denied access of international organizations to provide humanitarian assistance to the most affected places.
Not only Ukraine, U.S. envoy to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield also called on Moscow to provide time-bound humanitarian safe passage and notification system to help aid the evacuation process.
We call for the Russian Federation to agree to and honor in good faith Ukrainian proposals for time-bound humanitarian safe passage in specific agreed-upon locations. We call for the establishment of a ground-level notification system that will facilitate the safe movement of humanitarian convoys and flights.
India, meanwhile, once again reiterated its call of immediate cessation of violence in Ukraine. India's ambassador to the United Nations, T.S. Tirumurti, told the Security Council on Monday that India was concerned that a humanitarian corridor did not emerge for Indian students in Sumy, Ukraine, despite New Delhi's repeated request to both sides for a safe passage.
India has been consistent in calling for an immediate end to all hostilities. Our Prime Minister once again spoke to the leadership of both sides today and reiterated our call for immediate ceasefire and the need for both parties to return to the path of dialogue and diplomacy. We have also reiterated our urgent demand for safe and uninterrupted passage for all innocent civilians, including Indian nationals remaining in Ukraine. We are deeply concerned that despite our repeated urgings to both sides, the safe corridor for our students stranded in Sumy did not materialize.
As of 6th of March, the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has reported at least 406 civilian deaths. The real figure could be way higher, owing that not all deaths are getting reported. The World Food Programme, meanwhile, has said that it is setting up supply chain operations to deliver immediate food and cash assistance to 3 to 5 million people inside Ukraine. And for more on this, our correspondent Susan Teherani has sent us this report from New York.
It's Europe's fastest growing refugee crisis since World War II, and the humanitarian situation in Ukraine has been deteriorating since February 24th, when Russia launched that military offensive against the country. On Monday, the United Nations Security Council met once again this time to discuss the humanitarian situation in the country. Member states heard from UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffin, where he reminded everyone that the UN and its humanitarian efforts have been underway in eastern Ukraine since 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea. However, assistance has been multiplying in the last 2 weeks in the form of food, medicine, blankets, and other basic necessities due to the ongoing needs of the people inside of Ukraine. He also said that a UN team from his office had been sent to Moscow to better the humanitarian civil-military coordination. Member states also had the opportunity to hear from UNICEF Executive Director Catherine Russell, where she described in detail the dire effects that this war has had on children. The UN estimates that 1.7 million Ukrainians have fled the country due to the war. Half of them are children, many of them are unaccompanied minors. She also said that those left in the country are now facing life-threatening conditions. The plea from the international community on Monday was clear. It was a call for a sustained pause in violence, for the safe passage of humanitarian aid and assistance, and also safe access for civilians to be able to get these aids and cross the border when needed. The UN Security Council is expected to come up with a draft resolution exclusively regarding the humanitarian situation in Ukraine in the coming days. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.